So, welcome everyone to this lovely event with Randi Triant and Sarah Johnson. My name is Greg Newton. I am the co founder of the Bureau of General Services Queer Division with my partner.
And I'm Donnie Jokum, the other co-founder.
The Bureau is a queer bookstore and event space that we founded in 2012, and we have been hosted by the LGBT Community Center in Manhattan since 2014. And the center is still closed, so we are still closed. But we are waiting on news and hoping that within at least this calendar year that we might be able to reopen. In the meantime, we've been doing lots of virtual events like this, and we're going to keep doing that until we can reopen. And we also launched an online store, which I'll briefly share screen with you so you can see that. Yes, there is Sarah Johnson's The Last Sailor. And if we go back, yes, both of our authors' books are there.
Excellent.
Yeah, so if you go to the top, bgsqd.com/store, you'll see different boxes like books by category and different Reclaim Pride Coalition recommends and Lambda Award finalists, etc. And then you get to our featured products, which are authors from tonight. So those books are 25% off if you want to get a copy today. The sale ends at the end of the day, so now it is the moment. And I'll post the links for that in the chat box in a minute. So we will do a Q&A as we get close to the end of the hour. So if you want to put questions in the chat function, you can do that. But we're a small enough group that if you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, that's also fine. So I'm going to introduce both of our authors, and then we'll get started with a reading from Sarah and then from Randi. So let me pull up their bios. So I'll read Randi's first. Randi Triant will read from her new psychological suspense novel, A New Life. Her debut novel, The Treehouse, was selected by the lesbian and bisexual cultural site AfterEllen.com as an ultimate summer read. The Treehouse reads like a fabulous lesbian soap opera, chock full of wit and overflowing with heart. In addition to The Treehouse, Randi Triant's short fiction and nonfiction have appeared in literary journals and magazines, including 2 anthologies of writing about HIV/AIDS, Art and Understanding, Literature from the First 20 Years of ANU, and Fingernails Across the Blackboard, Poetry and Prose on HIV/AIDS from the Black Diaspora. She has taught writing at Boston College and Emerson College, and you can check out her work on randitriant.com. Sarah Ann Johnson will read from her latest novel, The Last Sailor. John Clinch, author of Marley and Finn, says of The Last Sailor, there is real life in Sarah Ann Johnson's new book, and genuine family drama too, all grounded in an authoritative evocation of old Cape Cod's waterways, marshes, and waterfront towns. The Last Sailor is memorable, clearly seen, and deeply felt. Sarah Ann Johnson's previous books are The Lightkeeper's Wife, The Very Telling, The Art of the Author Interview, and Conversations with American Women Writers. Her interviews appear in The Writer's Chronicle, Glimmer Train Stories, Provincetown Arts, and The Writer. She has taught writing at Lesley College and Bennington College. And you can check out more of her work at sarahannjohnson.com. So please give a warm and visual welcoming to our readers, and let's get started.
Thank you, Greg and Donnie, for having us. It's wonderful to be here. And thank you, everybody, for coming to visit our reading. So I'm going to read from The Last Sailor, from the first chapter. Near the end of the road, Nathaniel took a left and found the path that led through briars and brush into the marsh. Rascal followed him through seagrasses washed flat by the tides and dried in the wind and the sun, so they were soft beneath his feet. The smells of clay and salt water, the fetid odor of rotting brush, the swish of grasses in the breeze that came in off the bay, and the gray evening light were his home. He and the dog hurried along the path toward the island. Feeling the miles in his legs, Nathaniel moved through the fecund odors of wild grapes. A fox dashed into the woods. Nathaniel made out the copper-red body with black around the head, furtive in the light of the late afternoon. Rascal ran after him, and Nathaniel knew that was the last he'd see of the dog. Today. Nathaniel imagined the fox's sense of smell leading it along the trail of a smaller animal that was itself instinctively chasing another odor that had to do with nuts or non-carnivorous sustenance. A flock of geese swooped low to the ground as if to claim it. Nathaniel looked up when he heard their loud nasal complaints on their way to the fields where they pecked at the earth. A world of instinct driven by unknowable forces confronted him every day, and he found reassurance in the fact that the fox knew to stay hidden in the daylight, and the geese knew where to find sustenance. Nathaniel wanted to survive on instinct alone. That was why he had moved out to the marsh, to live outdoors and on his own, without the distraction of working for his father or fishing on a schooner with a bunch of other men. He was his own man, and that was something his father couldn't understand. As he neared the island, nothing more than an outcrop of beech trees and scrub pine, bayberry bushes and briars, he stepped beneath a canopy of branches. It built the shack at the center of the island, where even the highest tides couldn't reach. Only 12 feet by 12 feet, the shack held enough room to live in and had for a long time. Grass poked up through the floorboards in spring and rotted beneath in fall. Then the clean smell of frozen ground surrounded him all winter. The structure had a strong foundation of stones he'd carried from the woods on the other side of the road. He had survived many storms on this island, snow and gales and one hurricane. He knew how to barricade himself in. The shack was braced with logs. He had placed the gray weather-worn boards with precision and double-filled the walls with sea hay for insulation. Nathaniel couldn't remember when he first thought of living outdoors. He supposed it was the idea had been with him since he was a boy, making fires from flint rock, sleeping with his brothers in a fort they'd built with a lean-to woven from branches and covered with a canvas tarp. Only fishing for what he needed to eat, growing turnips, building his own shelter. These things pulled at some primitive longing. But moving to the marsh as an adult had been more than a response to that longing. It had been a desire for comfort and the kind of ease he could only know living outside. There was a purity in the marsh, a simple rhythm to each day that soothed Nathaniel, and he clung to that rhythm as a wall against loss. On the marsh, he didn't recall Jacob's footsteps on the stairs or expect him at the breakfast table. He didn't hear his father crying in the night. Nathaniel could live with the loss because he wasn't constantly confronted with his brother's absence. But still there were days when he didn't leave the shack, when he curled around a blanket and held his pillow to his stomach. At those times, no amount of sun on his body or wind or fish in his boat could soothe him. When the tide reached the high water mark twice a day, the island was separated from the rest of the town, and this too gave him comfort. Since it first moved out here, a new life had taken shape within him. Each day passed in the same simple way, hearing the birds squawk, waking at sunrise, fishing and eating, then sleeping alone. His body became a gauge for weather. Rain from the northeast, a southwesterly wind, clear skies, and the ocean flat calm. He would row into the harbor and lose himself in fishing, and one day would follow after another. Inside the shack, he blinked against the wafting dark. He reached for a shirt on the back of a chair and pulled it on over his bare skin. There was a daguerreotype of their mother in a small wooden frame nailed to the wall by the door. She had died giving birth to Jacob. Nathaniel gently touched the picture with 2 fingers whenever he left the shack. Jacob's captain's hat hung on a peg by the door. He was 7 years old when Nathaniel gave him the blue hat with a black leather visor and gold trim. The boy had refused to take it off, and from where he rode in the front of the boat, he had looked like a little figurehead leading them toward the bay. Jacob wore his hat on the boat, at dinner, to church, where he was forced to hold it in his lap during services. He took it off to sleep and kept it on the table by his bed so that he could put it on first thing in the morning. Nathaniel knew that Jacob loved the hat because Nathaniel gave it to him, and because the hat meant he was a captain, and he felt seen as more than a little boy. When Jacob stopped wearing the hat as he got older, Nathaniel felt a pang of sadness. Jacob would have loved the shack, helping his brother lay the foundation, hammering boards into walls. More than that, he would have loved sleeping within those walls, far from their father's house in an imagined wilderness. For that was how it was. Over 2 miles across the marsh could feel like a world away. Nathaniel pumped some water into a tin cup and drank it down, then went inside and cast about for something to eat. The bread, hard from sitting on the table, filled his mouth with a feeling like salt caked to his tongue. The money he stuffed in a jar on the shelf. He couldn't afford to pay for much beyond the necessities he needed to survive, like the salt beef he reached for on top of the cabinet. He unwrapped a piece of cloth and shaved a slice of meat right into his mouth as he watched the last streaks of light across the floor. He let his weight fall back on the bed, his mind lost to the dark and the quiet of the day. Fish leapt in his dreams until Nathaniel also was in the water, and there was young Jacob drifting just beyond his reach, the fish glistening while Nathaniel kicked hard toward his brother. But for all his kicking, he didn't move an inch, and Jacob drifted farther away, and the fish didn't notice a thing. Thank you.
That was great. That was
Thanks.
great. So I am going to read, as Greg said before, from A New Life, and I'm also going to start at the beginning of mine. But before I do, happy Pride, everybody, especially in New York.
Happy Pride.
Okay. Prologue. She is drugged and fast asleep when the whale hits. Stillwater is big enough to be considered a yacht, yet small enough with its automated mechanics to be handled by one man with no crew. Moments before, 4 passengers on deck lost sight of the whale that they'd been pursuing heedlessly. It'd been straight ahead, reaching in a tremendous arc just 300 feet away, a performance worthy of SeaWorld. Then it disappeared. Unknowingly, they drew closer and closer. Without warning, the whale ascended for another breach, striking the fiberglass hull on the port side, immediately rupturing it, the impact shattering part of his jawbone, and tilting the 80,000-pound boat too far over to the right. Inside, everything is tossed to the starboard side, straining Stillwater's ability to stay upright. The galley cabinets and dishwasher pop open, spilling and smashing glasses and dishes. In the salon, finger bowls of pimento stuffed olives and peanuts and martini and champagne glasses slide across the bar, crashing onto the floor. All the salon furniture, the L-shaped banquet, the teak coffee table, the bar stools remain bolted to the floor, but the staterooms are a different matter, as as beds and tables and luggage collide. A monstrous groaning and awful rumble begins as the boat's keel strains against water pressure and a lopsided load. The boat lists farther, its right side dangerously submerging into the freezing ocean, the damaged left side following closely behind, its gaping wound shipping water fast. Stillwater's owner is catapulted from the flybridge into the ice-cold Atlantic. 3 other passengers are heaved from the upper deck as if the boat coughed them up, and they land in a maelstrom of lounge chairs, cushions, tables, and champagne bottles. In a cabin below deck, she is flung over with her small bed, another twin bed, a nightstand, a fold-up stool, and the desk that is the size of a tiny vanity crash about in a tornado of confusion and chaos and noise. What was once floor soon becomes ceiling. She falls so hard the wind is knocked out of her. Her wrist snaps. Upside down, the boat quickly fills with salty water. The 6 bilge pumps can't keep up. They, along with the engine, shut down in despair. The ocean rushes through the overturned deck, the salon and galley, picking up velocity and volume, especially down the submerged side she's in. The water hurtles through the gash in the hull and along the passageway to the staterooms as if hunting for her. By the time it pounds against her own door, starts to slip through the gaps in the door jamb, she's barely regained consciousness, struggling to understand what's happening, where she even is. Something is chaining her to a dream world, reluctant to let her go. Her eyelids flutter open. It's dark in the room. She can hardly see. Pain in her wrist, her drug sleep still tugging, almost makes her black out. She crawls, drags herself to one of the beds, and grabbing its upturned leg, pushes herself to her knees. She stumbles to the floor, over furniture and luggage, holding her wrist against her chest. She continues as best as she can, floundering, terrified she'll fall down. Wake up, she thinks, wake up. There is the door, but it's upside down. Her fingers tremble as they touch it. Her pajamas by her knees are wet, the floor around her sopping. Groggy, she can't make sense of it. Then she does. Water. The room is filling with water. Did a pipe burst? Get out, she thinks. But when she turns the doorknob, the door won't budge. Someone's locked her in. Then a foggy memory surfaces. A key unlocks the door from the outside, but she can also unlock it from the inside. She fumbles for the twist mechanism in the knob center. Her inept fingers slide away again and again. The water is rising. With a click, the door unlocks. She opens it, then realizes too late it's the wrong thing to do. The restrained ocean breaks free, barreling into her tiny cabin and knocking her off her feet. On her way down, her temple smashes into a bed's metal leg. Her scream is swallowed whole underneath the numbing water. And then darkness. Chapter 1. The last time I saw my sister, she was waving at me through a glass wall at Logan Airport. Paper cutouts of Halloween pumpkins stretched across the lower half of the glass. Actually, Sandy gave me more of a jaunty salute than a wave. I thought it was her wacky way of somehow keeping with the sailor motif. She was headed for a weekend boat trip with work people around Cape Cod. Please kill me, I told her when she asked if I wanted to join in the fun. Maybe that salute was the last dig at me. Growing up, although Sandy was 2 years older, I tried my best to order her around with little result. You're not the boss of me, Isabel, she'd say. She and her mother called me Isabel, my real name, when they were annoyed or angry with me instead of my pet name, Tibby. So maybe she was saluting me in the airport because I'd been ordering her around too much the night before. She'd come to Boston to stay with me overnight before leaving in the morning for Provincetown. We'd argued. She wanted her ex-girlfriend to move back into their Brooklyn apartment. They'd been separated for a few months after the ex, Hayden, had had a one-night stand with some trashy bartender. I can't talk about this. It's a soap opera, I snapped at Sandy. I wasn't only upset that she decided to forgive Hayden. That there was a Hayden at all was the problem. You know, said my sister, they say whoever protests the loudest has the most to hide. Yeah, other than Shakespeare, no one says that, I said sharply. Sandy tapped her bangs then as if she was straightening them, a habit she fell back on whenever she was anxious or nervous. For all of her bluster about me being a little dictator, my sister was what I'd call outwardly confident, inwardly a cream puff. Me, on the other hand, well, there's no guesswork between outside and inside. I'm who you want to be next to if the bomb goes off. Trust me. But maybe Sandy had some premonition that day at the airport. Maybe the salute was simply a final see of sorts, a fatal sayonara, a signing off. Whatever the salute's meaning, my sister turned away from me, handed the Cape Air agent her ticket, and that was that. 15 minutes later, I found my car in the parking lot. slipped into the driver's seat, and sped home. End of story. Wait, that's a lie. I promised I'd be truthful, and if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it right, damn it. So the truth, before I slid my Saab into first gear, I exhaled loudly. A huge sigh of relief. It's one of the 100 things I regret. By nightfall, my sister was dead at the age of 45. The thing is, Sandy was a kick-ass swimmer. She was the only one, male or female, I knew who'd ever swam the length and back again of Abenaki Pond in the New Hampshire town where we'd grown up. Yet she was the only one who drowned on that boat carrying 4 other people. I found that out when Captain Eldridge from the Provincetown Coast Guard station called me that night. At 6 o'clock in the evening on October 16, 2018, still water set out from the harbor at Provincetown, Massachusetts. At approximately 9 p.m., the Provincetown Coast Guard received a distress call that Stillwater reported, Mayday, Mayday, we've been hit by a whale. At 9:32, the Coast Guard found Stillwater, quote, badly damaged and sinking with its passengers holding onto the hull, end quote, except for one passenger, my sister. I wrote down all of these details as soon as I hung up the phone from Captain Eldridge. You might think I should have been too distraught to even think to record what he told me. Maybe you think I didn't love my sister, but you'd be wrong. Writing down the facts is second nature to me, like breathing or making sure my nightly scotch is one and only one ice cube in its short glass. I've spent the last 20 years as a journalist at a Boston newspaper. A pad of paper and a pen are always rubber banded to my cell phone, so it's not strange that I immediately scribbled down everything Eldridge was telling me. In the face of something so unthinkable, so painful, the journalist in me came to the rescue, shutting every other emotion down. Now that 3 months have passed since she died, however, I'm not so sure that's the whole story of what happened on that fateful day in October. I've begun to question whether Captain Eldridge really knew everything there was to tell me. I'm pretty sure, though, of 2 things. My sister was the best swimmer I've ever known, and I'm going to find out why she was the only one who died on Stillwater. There's something else I want to know. How are those 4 survivors living with themselves now? I leave tomorrow to find out. Failing that, I hope to make their lives as miserable as they have made mine. You see, I'm the only one left to tell the story and the truth. Thank you.
Love it, Randy.
So, that the section that you read tonight, Sarah, I'm always impressed. I mean, I've read the book several times, as you know, and in several versions, and I'm always impressed by your command of details and about the boating industry and fishing, and it takes place in 1898, and you always get the details so right. And I just wondered with this particular book, because there's so many emotional details about the aftermath of a drowning and a family getting through that, whether you had to do more research because of all of the emotional details on top of the physical and the location and the place and everything else.
So I did very little research for this book. I had written The Lightkeeper's Wife, which was set in 1843 before this, and I learned a lot in researching that about what was around for the history. And in terms of other details, like I know a lot about sailing and maritime history because I grew up in a sailing family, and my grandparents collected maritime memorabilia, like antiquities and arts.
Mm.
So I was always around these things and asking questions, and it was my surroundings, you know. So I knew a lot about the history of sailing as well as sailing. And in terms of the emotional details, like I haven't lost anyone to drowning, but I think just having a deep empathy with the characters and having experienced tremendous loss over other things, that deepens the empathy with the characters. And through that empathy, so much comes out in the narrative that I'm not even aware of. So I really think that empathy is a huge aspect for a writer to be in touch with the characters. I don't know if you find that as well.
Yeah, definitely. I wondered also if you had written emotional profiles out for them, or did you just start writing and have the characters develop as you went along?
Yeah, I do nothing ahead of time. They just start yapping and I start typing. I never know where it's going to go ahead of time. It's sort of revealed to me as I go along.
Mhm.
And yeah, it is. It's like a leap of faith diving into a novel. And yeah, I always feel like I'm stepping off the edge, but it's in a good way too, you know.
Mhm. Mhm.
One of the things I loved about your book was you balance humor and grief so well. And I wondered if that's like a dichotomy that came out of the like having empathy for the characters and wondering like what is the role of empathy in your work?
So the role of empathy, I think, I more or less instill with I try to be in their footsteps when they're sad, or when they're combating their guilt. Guilt is a huge emotion for me to write about. I like writing about the different kinds of guilt that people have.
Mm.
Some of it very deep and some not. And so my empathy goes towards that. In terms of humor, I literally just use the humor to balance it out for the reader and to make it lighter for the reader, because it can be such a heavy topic. And I mean, every single person goes through loss at some stage of their life. Some of us go through it at very young ages, and others takes a while, but we all experience loss of all different kinds. And so for me to write about loss, which is one of my favorite topics, it appears, which I had no idea, I need to balance it out. So I like to have a character in there who I hope is funny for people to read and will make them laugh and give them relief as they're reading this, heavy book about a family in the aftermath of a drowning or an accident. And in my case, you don't know if it's an accident or murder.
It's so funny in places I was laughing out loud, and then it would go, like you said, into those deeper, more difficult parts. But it was, yeah, it was, you have a very good wit. It's wonderful. I love that. And I'm so not funny in my work.
I don't know about that. I don't know about that. I mean, I probably chalk my sense of humor. It's not for everybody, and I chalk it up to, and with my characters, it's usually a little bit sarcastic, a little bit edgy. And I think it's from my New York background, to be honest.
It's so fun.
To survive in my family, you had to be a little bit witty, I guess. So I'm glad that came out for you.
Yeah, and the having grown up on Cape Cod, it's different for me than so it really it tickles me. So
yeah, well, it's sometimes it lands, and the humor lands, and then other times I'm not so sure about it.
oh, come on.
Anyway, I just do it because it's joyful for me to have a character who I hope is somewhat funny as
That's
well.
awesome.
So both of our books, as we both know, are about the aftermath of a sibling who drowns, and they're very different, as we've talked a lot about. And so what was the most difficult part for you for writing this particular book about the aftermath of a sibling drowning? Like, what was the hardest part for you to write? Do you remember?
Yeah, I think it was the actual drowning. Not technically difficult, but just so freaking sad, and this guy is so sad. But I didn't feel sad writing it. It was just the drowning was, it was, I was feeling it. And but I didn't feel sad writing the book. I felt just this like a connection with the characters that was really fulfilling to me. And to be able to call on those parts of myself that don't get expressed every day, the sadnesses and the losses. Like that's one of the things I love about writing is all the parts that get called on that you normally aren't in your awareness, like in everyday life. So that's very fulfilling for me.
And what was the most joyful part of writing the book?
There was some, like, the joyful thing for me is when I nail a line, you know. So those were the things, like those were the things, like when I just hit it just right, that make me happy.
Mhm.
You know, I'm just like, yes, where'd that come from? Sure wasn't me.
Right.
Yeah, it's cool.
I have to get that down before the phone rings. is what I
Exactly.
usually say to myself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I had a question. I loved the ending of the book. Like, it's totally satisfying. Like, and I'm curious if this is something, you know, I know every writer struggles with an ending. You know, we want to resolve all the threads of the story without being contrived. And I felt like you did this so well, because it works on a deep level for the characters and for the reader. So I wondered, like, what were some of the considerations you had around this, and maybe any challenges?
Well, as you know, I always have the entire book in my head before I can sit down and write. And it changes as I go along, and the characters kind of take control of it a little bit as I go along. And so there's always changes. And then you and I both share our work with other people, including
Yeah.
ourselves. And so I definitely, you know, after a year or two, I had the whole, pretty much the outline of the story in my head and how it would start and how it would end. And then I gave, and so I knew, I don't think I'm giving away anything for anybody who hasn't read it. I knew I wanted to open it with her saying, the last time I saw my sister, she was waving at me through the window of Logan Airport. And I knew I wanted to end with her saying, well, actually, I lied. That wasn't the last time I saw my sister.
Right.
Because she's basically a narrator that she's an unreliable narrator. You know, she's constantly saying, trust me, which, you know, right away, don't trust this person. Whatever you do not trust this character. Or she, you know, she's always saying, I think 4 times in the book, she says, okay, I lied, but this is the last time I'm lying to you, you know, as a reader. And you know, it's not going to be the last time. So I wanted to kind of box it that way. I wanted her to say at the beginning, the last time I saw my sister, and then the last time I saw my sister at the end. And then after that, there was a little bit more of or right before that, there was a quasi ending right before that. And I gave it to my readers, and one or two of the readers said, okay, this is too vague for me. What happened with these people? Like, who ended up with whom? Basically, what people want to know. They want to know who ends up with whom.
Totally.
And so I went back through the novel and kind of drove it towards that end a little bit better. So, you know, that the ending, I didn't want it to be contrived. So I'm happy to hear that you didn't think it was contrived. But yet I didn't want people to walk away and say, wait, what just happened? What happened? You know, I wanted the reader to think about it, but I didn't want them to, you know, be confused by it.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So you have a lot of characters in there. You change POV. And I just wondered, did you know from the get-go that you wanted to be changing it, to have multiple points of view in it and different voices? And do you think that was important, especially with the topic of a family going through loss?
Yeah, I really wanted to get inside each character and show their motivations and their experience with grieving. Because I felt like their experience with grief from the inside determined so much of what happened on the outside. So I really wanted to go there. And one of the interesting things is my novels, like as I'm writing these first books, the story kind of comes from, I write the outside first and then I go in. Like I write the outside and I know what the inside is, but I write it after.
Mhm.
And the book I'm working on now comes from the inside first.
Huh.
So it's you never know what to expect when you sit down as a.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think you're
I
changing?
think I'm getting, I think it's an improvement. I think
Mhm,
I think my writing is evolving, and I
mhm,
think that book is a big leap.
mhm.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm psyched about it. I'm enjoying it. Yeah.
And what attracted you to write the book originally? I mean, the story is so strange how you and I both came up when
Right, right.
we first were going to write these books, and then we, told each other, and you were like, "Well, I'm writing a book about a sibling who drowns. So I'm writing one," and I said, "Well, I'm writing a book about a sibling who drowns." And although they're very different, so what do you think attracted you to the whole concept of family loss and accidents and?
That's a big question. So no one I know has drowned. But I think the way the book came to me was it started with him rowing.
Mhm,
And I wanted him to live in the marsh because as a kid, I always wanted to live in the marsh. I grew up across the street from the marsh and I wanted to be Huckleberry Finn and go live in the marsh. So I wanted the character to live in the marsh. So I had to explore why he would do that. And I felt that if he had lost someone close to him and felt responsible in some way, he could just have a meltdown and need to sort of like remove himself
mhm.
and deal with himself in his own way. And so that got me intrigued with how all these other characters and how they would cope with it.
Mhm.
I don't know if that was true for you.
Yeah, I knew that I wanted different perspectives because
Yeah.
so I had the mystery and suspense element that I wanted little pieces of the story. You wouldn't know exactly what happened despite that prologue of the whale hitting. You really wouldn't know what led up to that and
Right.
why they were there.
Right.
And so for me, I was using the different POVs, and the only one who is in first person, who can speak in first person, I knew it was Tibby's story in a way. So she's the only one who speaks in first person. The other characters, I do a close third point of view. And so, Miles is dealing with drug addiction. He's living in P-Town in a train car. So, when I was writing that, I basically, he's so frenzied because he's detoxing when he, goes on this journey with Tibby. And so I had to, write that differently than Tibby's sections. And then the other, Hayden was she had her own guilt going, so she had to be a different type of character. So it just helped me not only get across the different ways of approaching loss for each of them, but also it allowed me to do the mystery and suspense part, because you get a little piece,
Right.
in the chapters, and then you're kind of putting it all together.
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, I it's the first time I was writing a mystery in suspense, and I wanted to see if I could do it. And
Awesome.
yeah, so it was a lot of fun for me actually to do that.
Go ahead. No,
No,
go.
you-
Well, I was going to say, should we see if the audience has any questions?
Greg? Oh, do you want me to look?
No, there's no question. Oh, I'm sorry.
Anybody can ask a question out loud.
Yeah, you can unmute yourself and ask a question. There are no questions in the chat function yet.
Oh, okay. Yes, Dave.
Anybody have questions?
I'd like to make a comment if that's allowed.
Yes,
Yeah.
David.
Am I? Okay. I wasn't sure if I was unmuted here or not. It's really addressed to Sarah, at least to start with, and I was immediately drawn to your book. I've already
Thank
read a
you.
bit of Randy's already. But first, the writing felt so easy for me. It almost felt like I really wanted to be on that house on the marsh. And it was just, right, it felt like, in a way, vacation, but I knew there was a lot of sadness around it too. But I guess, both of these books with loss and all, I think we, the readers, are always searching for our own answers.
Yeah.
So, particularly what your character that you had that point of view felt like me, to me at least, listening to this short part. So I just think that's a compliment to you, that this reader felt immediately like, I want to keep going to find out more about myself.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
So I'll go order your book also.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I wrote a couple things down that, some of your just easy characterizations or descriptions, like when you said the character could feel the weather in his body. I was like, that's me.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And then I remember distinctly you writing about, he put the shirt on his bare skin, and just the bare skin just stuck with me. So anyway, and then Randi is more complicated for me because I know Randi for more than 2/3, 3/4 of her life, or whatever it is, and 2/3. And
don't age me, David. Don't age me.
well, we met very young, my dear.
Yeah.
And we still are young. And I'm always searching for, it's a different reading for me with a very close friend that I love. I'm searching for knowledge about my friend. So
interesting.
I'm not a unbiased reader. So I look forward to reading more about and seeing, because Randi, I'm glad to hear you wrap some things up, because you don't wrap everything up, I don't think. And you don't give everything away. But I definitely, and I look forward to your humorous characters, because you definitely soften your sadness with humor in real life. So I look forward to reading both of them more. Thank you.
That's beautiful, David. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
I have a question.
Yes.
So my friend Jessica actually wants me to ask this question about the zapper, where the idea from the zapper come from, and is it real? And yeah, can you enlighten us? She wants to know.
So for those of you who haven't read the book, there is a zapper, a defibrillator that plays a huge part in the book. And I don't want to give too much away, but so the question was, again, Fiona, was it real?
Could you enlighten us about the zapper? Where did it come from?
Oh,
yeah.
So I don't want to give too much away about what happens, but Miles, he was a graphic designer before the accident, and then when the boat goes down, he decides to leave New York and move to the place where the accident took place, which was off of Provincetown, and move into this terrible home of a dilapidated train car. And he becomes an EMT because he needs some money coming in. So he decides to become an EMT because he went through this horrible boat going down and Sandy drowning. So he decides to change course and become an EMT. And he's asked his mother, because he has really no money, to buy him a secondary zapper, so that he tells her it's in case the one that he has on the rescue squad doesn't perform well. And so he'll have his own personal zapper. And zapper. And so I don't want to give too much away, but it is a real thing. And that company that I name in there, the name of it, is a real thing. And I had talking about research when Sarah said she didn't do very much. I had to watch videos of how to use the zapper because I had no idea. So the amazing thing about the world right now is YouTube. You can find out about anything.
That's
And so,
true.
you know, I felt like God, I hope my wife doesn't walk in while I'm watching these videos showing how to use the defibrillator, because she'll start to wonder what's really going on with me. And I had to watch them over and over again, because in the book, when he finally uses it for not a very good purpose, I had to know what there's a mechanical voice that comes along with it when you press the button and start it, and it tells you what to do every step of the way, the person who's using it, which I had no idea about. And so I had to play the voice over and over again. I had to get the feeling for the zapper. I asked people who have had you know, the paddles put on them, how that felt, because I've never had that. And so I spent a lot of research on that, which ended up taking up maybe a couple paragraphs in the whole book. But anyway, so that's the answer to your friend,
The zapper.
the zapper. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
That she's my wife, everybody, by the way. So
Hi, Fiona.
she's the one
Hi.
she's the one I didn't want walking in on me when I was finding that out.
Walk
But
in on her doing all sorts of things.
yeah, although the book I'm writing right now has there's an occult part of it, and so there's a lot. I've got a stack of books behind me on how to use poisons.
Oh my God.
You know, so
Fiona, if you need help, just call him right up the street.
Are you really writing a book though?
yeah, right. Am I really? I don't know. You'll have to wait. Any other questions?
Susan Kurtzman?
Comment. Can you hear me? I have a
Yeah.
comment. Oh, okay. I've known Sarah Johnson a while
Uh-oh.
and read all of her books. Randy, I haven't read your book yet. I'm really looking forward to it. And I think I'm going, if I can order it tonight, I will order it tonight.
Great.
And I've actually known Randy a long time too. But I was going to say about the research part of it, the whole interesting thing about Sarah's book is that you're in the marsh, in the Cape, and it's exactly the way it is. I mean, I live on Cape Cod, and you grew up here, and it's just like it surrounds you. It's almost another character, you know, to me, because the description of it is so much part of, you know, what your characters are involved with. And I love that whole beautiful description of the landscape and the water and the marsh and the whole thing. So that's something that I really appreciate about your work, is that kind of thing just sort of comes naturally and beautifully. You write it beautifully.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I was telling Sarah that I've been reading this Swedish writer, Tove Jansson, and she wrote that landscape is always psychology. And I think that Sarah does that so well, that she uses the landscape to get across the psychology of her characters and what they're going through at that moment. It's
moving into the marsh and moving out of the marsh, and where the father lives up on a hill, and it's like it's just separate. And yeah, I agree. It really is a big part of the book, and it's really a beautiful part of the book.
I wanted to remind everyone the links to the books are in the chat. So Susan, if you want to order it, you can order it.
Yep.
Awesome.
This was great. I really
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Else have any questions or comments or anything else you want to share? Or...
I just want to thank you, Greg and Donnie, for organizing this event. It's really lovely.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Our pleasure.
I hope we can host you both in the flesh someday.
That would be great.
It'd be wonderful.
Yeah, we'll get there.
And when we finally visit Provincetown,
Yeah.
we'll come knock
Oh,
on your door. Hey, what's up?
Show
you
us the flashes.
You have to. It's much better than Fire Island. Much better.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
You
Greg
will.
and Donnie, where is your physical store?
So it's inside the LGBT Community Center on West 13th Street.
Greg and Donnie, where is your store? It's in New York, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're inside the
West,
LGBT.
I caught West 13th is all I heard.
Okay. Yeah, the LGBT Community
Oh.
Center on West 13th Street. Yeah.
Second floor.
Okay.
Yep.
They have
But
a-
it,
Oh,
they're
cool.
still
Okay.
closed. So they're still closed. We're waiting
Yeah.
on word for
Well,
reopening.
I'm frequently in that center, so I will definitely come by and introduce myself and look at your
Please
books
do.
and go
Yeah.
online. I hope you keep that up. I noticed I tried to go buy Sarah's book, but it takes me away from you guys, so I'll do that later. So keep that up for a little bit, or I'll just figure it out.
Yeah. You. Yeah. I hope we'll be able to reopen soon and start hosting events again. I mean, that's why we founded this, was to get people in a space together. It's kind of ironic that we've spent the last year doing all this virtual stuff when that was kind of what we were trying to get away from. But you know, it's also been kind of a lifesaver. It's been wonderful in a lot of ways we didn't anticipate, being able to host people who aren't in New York, and also being able to have people tune in for events from far away. So it's, you know, I
They're
think
definitely pros.
yeah, there are good things that have come out of
Yeah,
this. So we're happy about that. But thank you everyone who joined
Thank you,
us.
everybody.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, happy Pride.
Good night, everyone.
Happy Pride.
Happy
yes.
Pride.
Yeah, video on YouTube.
Great. Bye.
Bye.